Collis, again, thank you very much for signing for us. I think you know everybody here. Joe Bruno, the Commissioner for the Office of Emergency Management. Sal Casano, the Commissioner of the Fire Department. Ray Kelly, Commissioner of the Department. Kaz Holloway, Deputy Mayor for Operations. And Kevin Burke, CEO of Con Ed. We are again in the briefing room at the Office of Emergency Management. And I want to bring you up to date on the storm's progress. First of all, thank you, Lydia. And as everybody knows, we're already seeing significant impacts from the storm, and the worst of it is about to hit. I think we have done all we can to prepare. This afternoon, I spoke with President Obama, Treasury Secretary Geithner, and Governor Cuomo, all whom offered their support and coordination with the federal and state government, I will say, has been great. Now, as the storm intensifies, the most important thing I can say is if you're in your home or somewhere safe where you can remain, stay there. The time for relocation or evacuation is over. Conditions outside are dangerous, and they're only going to get worse in the hours ahead. In Queens, we're getting 10 times the normal call volume of 911 calls to the FDNY. Unfortunately, most are for down trees or flooding conditions. That's not what 911 is for. That's 311. But if you use 911, it means the operator and the line's not free for somebody who has a real emergency to call. So please use 311 for down trees or flooding. There have been more than 1,000 reports of tree damage in parks and on streets, and we're responding to them. Around half of them are for down trees, half of them are for other damage. Earlier today, a jogger was struck by a falling limb near Prospect Park and was hospitalized. Fortunately, she is going to be okay, and she was not in a closed park, but she was running near it. And when you run under trees, whether they're trees in the street or trees in a park, it is very dangerous with the wind, and a lot of these trees still have leaves on them. When the leaves are on the trees, they catch a lot of water. It makes them a lot heavier, and they're much more likely to break off and also to be susceptible to the wind. I can't emphasize enough, stay indoors and certainly away from the parks, the beaches, the boardwalks, piers, and seawalls. We actually had to give a couple of people summonses for trying to surf today. It is dangerous, and the most important thing is that we're going to have to come in after you, and for us to lose an emergency responder because of someone's irresponsibility would be just an outrage. Once again, if you're really in trouble, call 911. If not, 311. But 911 is only for true emergencies. Now, we've already seen flooding in some of the city's low-lying areas. We've also seen some power loss. More than 47,000 customers have lost power so far in the city. The vast majority of that, as you would expect, is in Queens and Staten Island because those are the areas served with overhead power lines. Con Ed may be shutting down power in parts of Lower Manhattan and southern Brooklyn, and Con Ed has been doing outreach to its customers. You may have received a phone call about this. Kevin Burke's going to update us in a couple of minutes. This is a preventive measure to protect their equipment from serious damage. It's a similar kind of thing to what the MTA did very intelligently of moving their equipment out of harm's way. It may mean we don't have the service of that equipment for a longer period of time, but it also means that when the storm is over, we can recover quickly. And if equipment is damaged, whether it's transportation equipment or power equipment, it can take days, weeks, even months to repair. We don't want that. And this time, I think we have taken all the appropriate steps. As far as transportation, we've seen closures of roadways along the water, and we can expect more. The FDR is either open or closed, depending on whether that part is flooded. You should assume that roads that go along the water are going to have big problems, and stay to those roads that are on higher ground, more inland. In addition to the bridge and tunnel closures that have already been announced, the East River bridges, the Brooklyn, Manhattan, Williamsburg, and Ed Koch Queensboro Bridge will close at 7 p.m. tonight. After 7 p.m., only emergency vehicles will be permitted on those bridges. And the city has something like 1,400 bridges, but most of the others are low bridges and don't really figure in terms of having any extra exposure to the wind. As you may know, there is a partially collapsed crane atop a building on West 57th Street. In order to keep residents safe, all buildings on the north and south sides of 57th Street between 6th and 7th Avenues, and all exposed buildings on 56th Street between 6th and 7th Avenues have been evacuated. One was a large hotel, but the hotel industry has found spaces for them, for the people there. We're sorry for the inconvenience, but better safe than sorry. Steam has been shut down in the vicinity of the crane, and water and gas shutdowns are underway as a preventive measure to mitigate damage if the boom from the crane were to collapse and fall into the street. OEM and the police department are assisting and providing transportation to shelters for anyone who needs it. Earlier today, Bob Steele and I spoke to Gary Barnett, president of the Extel Development Company, who is developing the project on 57th Street, and he and his staff are cooperating fully. I think we can expect more flooding and more outrages as the storm worsens. The most severe part of the storm is now beginning. As I said earlier today, Sandy is expected to make landfall just south of Atlantic City. That's in line with what's been predicted all along, although it is happening at a little faster pace than had been predicted. The storm's moving at roughly 30 miles an hour now rather than the 15 that it was doing before. But the city is still very much within the danger zone. The strong winds that we're experiencing now will strengthen through the rest of the evening with a high wind warning in effect now through Tuesday. There will be sustained winds of 40 to 55 miles an hour, gusts 70 to 80 miles an hour. That poses danger to power lines, to motorists, and certainly to anyone who's outdoors. And as I've emphasized all along, the greatest danger posed by Sandy is the coastal storm surge and flooding that it will produce. Now, the high point of this surge will be here shortly. In the Battery and in the Rockaways and on Staten Island, the surge will be highest at roughly 8:15, so say 6:30 to 10:30 is when you really will see the effects of it. In parts of the city that are on Long Island Sound, the peak surge will happen about 4 hours later, around midnight between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., and that includes City Island and other parts of the Bronx, and that's because the water that is going to surge there is water that's entered Long Island Sound out around Montauk, and it takes about 4 hours to come down through Long Island Sound until it hits there. The important thing here is stay inside. Some other precautions that you probably should take. If you're in a building with elevators, try to avoid using them. If you need to move between floors, use the staircases. Stay away from windows and close the drapes if you haven't already. In fact, one of the buildings that Office of Health and Mental Hygiene is in, the ground floor, one of the windows just blew out. Fortunately, nobody hurt. But wind is dangerous, and big pieces of glass have a lot of pressure against them, and you never know when one is going to give way. And our advice is try to relax and spend the night in. We expect the worst to be over tomorrow. It'll take a day or two to recover. I'm sure there'll be some things that'll take into the weekend to recover. But the most important thing, we'd like to continue what we've experienced so far, and that is no fatalities whatsoever. It would be wonderful if we can get through this, and then we can look back and dine on this storm of the century forever. But most importantly is to keep everybody safe. With respect to city employees, as I've said, the city is open for business, and it will be open for business tomorrow. Naturally, we do understand that given the storm's conditions and its impact on transportation, it may be difficult for people to get to work on time. City employees are expected at work tomorrow and should try their very best to get to work, provided they can do that safely, because this is the time when New Yorkers need those of us that work for the city the most. Now, we have a recovery plan in place for once the worst of the storm is passed. And we've been also doing work all along since the weather worsened. We will ramp up the storm efforts as the storm winds down. We can't get people to go up. Kevin, for example, can't get people in cherry pickers up to fix lines when the winds are this strong. We can't always cut down trees and clear that are half over and clear them in this kind of weather, but we are doing what we can to mitigate the problems currently and to make sure that when the weather moderates, we'll be there. Please remember, public transportation is shut down. It will certainly be closed tomorrow morning and likely remain closed through the day. I urge everybody to have patience. The MTA has done a great job of protecting their assets and notifying people, and they'll get mass transit going whenever they can, as long as they can do it safely. Public schools are obviously closed tomorrow, as are all city after-school programs. City parks will remain closed tomorrow. Please stay out of them. The possibility of a falling limb is real and very dangerous. Sanitation crews will be working at 7 a.m. to collect debris. The department has asked that you not put out any garbage tonight, but wait until the storm has passed. The problem is that no matter how you try to secure it outside, it's just going to blow, and it just makes a much bigger mess for everybody else. And let me say again, the storm is here. It's going to get worse this evening. Tomorrow morning, we'll be able to look back, and you'll certainly be on the other side of that curve. Stay inside. It's for your own safety. Conditions are going to be very dangerous outside. It's not nasty. This is dangerous. Winds of this magnitude can pick up something at a moment's notice and throw it right at you very hard, and it can be fatal. If you absolutely don't need to be outside, don't take the risk. Now let me turn the floor over to Kevin Burke, CEO of Con Ed. Kevin.
Thank you, Mayor. In addition to this being an incredible windstorm, and we're going to have significant outages for our service customers that are provided by overhead services, and we roughly have about 47,000 customers out of service right now in the city of New York. We think there's a significant chance of major flooding throughout parts of New York City. We're especially concerned about the downtown Manhattan and parts of the Brooklyn by Coney Island. We're looking at, and I think it's likely, that we will be preemptively shutting down the underground networks, two networks in Manhattan, the Fulton network and the Bowling Green network, which essentially cover the areas between Broadway, the East River, and south of the Brooklyn Bridge, and also perhaps Brighton Beach by Coney Island. And we're doing that to reduce the likelihood of damage to both our equipment and our customers' equipment. If the equipment is energized, as you can imagine, when salt water gets on it, you'll have shorts, but you'll have indications where damages our equipment, the customer's equipment, and it takes both of us longer to affect those repairs. In addition to that, we're looking throughout the city at other places where we provide fairly high voltages to customers, above the typical voltage that we would supply to a residential customer or a small commercial customer, and have identified about 20 large installations, throughout the 5 boroughs except Staten Island, the 4 boroughs of New York, excluding Staten Island. And what we're going to do is we're going to be watching those. If we think water is going to get into our facilities and the customers' facilities, we're going to preemptively shut those services off. That will impact about another 20, large facilities. And collectively, between the people who are directly our customers, and in some cases these buildings are master-metered large residential complexes, we think there's about 7,900 customers who might be affected by that. We've been talking to the large customers. We've had automatic calls going out to a significant number of the residential customers who might be affected by these steps. But it will allow us to get the service back faster than if the equipment was damaged. In addition, we'll continue to watch what happens with the steam system. We've shut off some of the steam system. It's reduced sources of supply to some of our customers. We're going to continue to watch the flooding. If the flooding significantly worsens, we're going to have to reduce steam service to even more customers, and perhaps even everybody south of 14th Street. We're looking at that as what we think might be the worst case scenario. But we're still continuing to watch the storm surge. As the mayor said, we think it's going to get worse between now and about a little after 8 o'clock this evening. The storm surge tomorrow morning shouldn't be as significant as the storm surge today. Finally, I'd just like to again remind customers, especially in the overhead areas, that if they see a wire down, assume that wire is energized. Don't go near it. Don't touch it. Give us a call at 1-800-75-CON-EDISON. Thank you.
Kevin, thank you. And let me also say that the job that the NYPD officers and the FDNY firefighters have been doing is really amazing. They've kept us safe. They're out there full-time. They're working long shifts, and a lot of them on duty, and that's exactly what we need to protect everyone and to make sure that we get through this where it's something that may be annoying and an inconvenience, but at least we got through it safely. Before taking questions, let me summarize today's announcement for our Spanish-speaking New Yorkers. La tormenta Sandy ha llegado a nuestra ciudad. Las condiciones pueden volverse más peligrosas en las próximas horas. Esta es una tormenta realmente grave y extremadamente peligrosa. Por favor, manténganse dentro de sus casas o en los albergues durante el resto de la noche. Las escuelas estarán cerradas mañana y no habrá transportación pública. With that, we'll be happy to take some questions, sir.
The crane, the city engineers, what are they saying, and what's the likelihood it will go down?
Nobody really knows. The last report I've gotten, the main tower seems to be well secured to the building. The only part that is in danger of falling, we think, is the boom. If it would fall, the street is being kept clear. We've taken precautions that the pipes and everything under the street are shut off, so in case it falls, it doesn't do any more damage, it doesn't start a fire or anything like that. We just don't want to risk the lives of anybody trying to be a hero and secure it at the moment. I think it's fair to say with the winds as they are, we just cannot secure it. We just best can do is take precautions. When the winds die down, the engineers will figure out a ways to secure it, and then they'll probably have to build another crane, which could take a long time, up on the roof, and then reach over and pick up the pieces of it.
So to clarify, the main part is attached to the building in some sort of...
Oh, yes. I mean, all those towers, they're attached every 5, 10, 20 floors, whatever it is, all the way up. And they go up and they put sections on top. Then there's the main cab with big weights on one side and the boom on the other. If you look at the boom, it has actually just been picked up and back over the other side. Why it happened at this point, nobody knows. You don't need to have somebody going out there to try to find out why. We don't need to lose a life to get some information that isn't going to be useful for the moment. Later on, we certainly will be able to establish that. Yes, sir?
Do you have any information whether it was properly tethered to begin with?
They're not supposed to be tethered. That's quite the contrary. They're supposed to be free and weather vane. And why it did not, nobody knows. This crane was inspected on the 26th, which is like Friday, as we did all the cranes in the city. And it's a crane that's been used for a long time by, reputable company, and there's no reason, we just have no idea why that happened. It's conceivable that nobody did anything wrong whatsoever, and that wasn't even a malfunction. It was just a strange gust of wind. But if you look with a pair of binoculars, you can see the boom, actually, it didn't fall down. It went up and bent right over and is still attached where it was before, and then on the other side, then went down. That's the good news, because maybe it won't fall. It's a lot of points where it's attached to the rest of it, but that's what we know at the moment. Yes, Miss?
2 questions. Who is responsible for that crane, and do you know how many people were evacuated in that area?
I don't. Kaz, we have evacuation numbers in the area. There's a number of buildings, including a big hotel, and we're still doing it. The crane is a crane company, and Bovis, one of the biggest contractors, is the contractor building the building. The buildings department is on site, the fire department is on site, the police department is on site, and they're looking at it. But the instructions to all of them are, don't try to be a hero and lose a life over this. If something were to fall, just make sure that it doesn't hurt anybody. Damage to equipment or buildings is not the problem, not the most important thing. Yes, sir?
Bovis was related to Deutsche Bank building, problems at Yankee Stadium.
Bovis is one of the best and biggest construction companies in the world, Bovis Lend-Lease. be hard to find problems that they weren't involved in simply because they do all the construction. I think they're far away the biggest, and it's a great company. And each of these buildings is done separately, and most of their, they have a record that if you look at it compared to other companies is fine. They don't have any more or less violations or anything else than anybody else that's reputable. Yes, sir.
Effective 7 p.m. tonight, how many connections will there be from Manhattan to other boroughs or New Jersey, and how long has it been since?
Virtually all of the main bridges from Manhattan to Brooklyn and Queens are going to be closed, and those to the Bronx, I think they're all of the Tri-Borough Authority, the Port Authority tunnel. I think the Holland Tunnel's closed. The Lincoln Tunnel, last I heard, was still open. The GW, I'm not sure whether they closed that or not. You'll have to check with the state closed. GW's closed, but the Lincoln's still open?
Yes.
Lincoln Tunnel's still open, so that's what you'd have to use to go over there.
And how long has it been since this many have been closed?
Well, I'm 70 years old, and I don't remember it. I don't know that it's ever been that. But keep in mind, look, the winds keep building. We know about it. Better to take precautions. And in all fairness, most people didn't come in or left early. The number of people trying to use the bridges, I came over the Brooklyn Bridge and I saw one car going the other direction and one car going with us. So while it's annoying, it's not going to influence it hurt that many people. And number two, people's safety is more important than inconvenience. And just we live in a world where when there's a big storm in a big city, most things are fine. Keep in mind, compared to other areas of the country where buildings get blown around and roads get torn up and washed away and that sort of thing, we experience relatively little damage. Yes, sir, you had a question.
Yes, we've already seen some flooding on the Gowanus Canal. How much do you think how big of a risk is there of extensive flooding? And given the pollutants in the canal, what are the types of environmental and health risks that may pose?
Well, look, at this point, the water is going to, tomorrow morning it'll be all over. It'll be all over late tonight, actually. In the Gowanus Canal, the flooding should be going down in a couple of hours. Anything you want to add on the Gowanus Canal?
Sure. I know the issue that you're referring to in terms of what the water could have. We'll make sure that we don't think there's any immediate danger to anybody, and if there's any issue, DEP will make sure that it gets taken care of. So, as the mayor said, the flooding should proceed with everything else, and we'll clean it up like everything else.
Yes, miss.
This is for Con Ed. If you do go through with this preemptive power shutdown, how long will it take after the water recedes to actually turn power back onto these buildings? And also, when you talked about the major consumers away from the financial center, where are those buildings located, and what buildings are they?
Okay. Depends on how much damage we have. That would determine how quickly we can get the networks back into service. If salt water gets in on our electrical equipment and salt water gets in on the customer's equipment, and most of the time this equipment is in the basement. So if the streets flood, and we did see some extensive flooding in a nor'easter in 1992, and that's what we're basing our experience on, we need to go back in and we'll replace some of that equipment. We're ready to do that, but again, it depends on how extensive the damage is to our equipment and to the customer's equipment. With respect to the other buildings, I'd say they're throughout the city, mostly in Manhattan. But I think there's one up in the Bronx, a couple in Queens and Brooklyn. But they're complexes like the Kips Bay complex. They were large complexes. It was more efficient for the developer to put in a high voltage system instead of, like I say, the system you might have in your home. It's more efficient to do that. That equipment is a little bit more susceptible to damage when it gets wet.
We see the stock exchange closed for a week, for 2 weeks, because we can't restore
I think
power.
it might be a couple of days. But that's one of the things we'd have to get back on. The stock exchange has its own generators, and the stock exchange could run without the power from Con Edison. And that's been practice that's been in place for at least 20 years that I know of. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Two questions. One, have the FDNY and NYPD needed to rescue anyone who didn't comply with your evacuation order? And two, can we get an update on the census numbers in your shelters?
Shelters, last time I checked, had about 3,500 people in them. Is that right, Seth? 3651 to be exact, but I'm just from memory.
We haven't had
anybody. No. We've not had to rescue anybody. I think as long as you stay indoors, you're probably safe. You would have been better coming out, and you never know. But so far, there's not been buildings collapsing. I think, yes, Miss.
Other than other than that jogger, there were no injuries that you know of?
Not that I know of. Does anybody have any other reports of? No. Yes, sir.
On Friday, you said that the buildings department inspected this crane. They did it for all cranes because
Yes.
of the approaching hurricane?
Yes, exactly.
So as of
And
now-
we also, every construction site to tie down all of the construction materials. And I haven't heard of any, I'm sure, I did see on television some debris blowing off a building, but it was a one-story building that looked like an old building, and its roof came off. And there's always going to be, when you have winds this strong, in a lot of these old buildings, you'll see brick coming down, a chimney could fall, and it could kill you. That's why you're just better off staying indoors. But as far as I know, there's not been any massive amount of construction material blown off. And in this day and age, the building department has worked very hard to reduce the danger of working on a construction site or living near it. If you remember, 7 years ago, we had lots of injuries. And in all fairness to Bob Lamandry and his crew, not everybody's been happy when he closes down a site for a safety violation, but I don't think we've had almost no fatalities since then.
That the standards were high enough?
In terms of what?
Well, it was inspected, and now the crane has.
Well, nobody knows. Just because it's inspected doesn't guarantee that God doesn't do things, or that the metal doesn't fail, or that there's no reason at this point in time to think that the inspection wasn't adequate. We just don't know what has happened, and you can make a story out of it if you want, but until we find out. And incidentally, so far the crane hasn't fallen. Yes, sir.
Two questions. I know this is far from over, can you just give an idea of how severe this storm has been in the context of what you've heard today from various people?
Well, I think that the winds tonight, I don't know if it's a record, but it's certainly close to. The surge is probably a record. It's going to be a little bit more or less. Nobody knows exactly where and how you measure it. It's going to be different. It's as bad a storm as we have seen modern day. The difference is today we're prepared for it. In the olden days, you would have had lots of fatalities. We're not through this yet, but so far, all of the procedures that we've had in place, all of the contact to explain to people what's going on and giving them the information so they can take effective measures, all of the things like the Con Ed and the MTA moving their equipment out of harm's way so they can recover quickly. The training that our police department and fire department has, and sanitation as well. I think we're probably better prepared than we've ever been before. And so it may be as bad a storm as we've ever seen, but I would expect the damage to be relatively minor.
Apart from the warning citizens, what are your top-level concerns just from the administration's point of view?
Well, you just don't want people to say, oh, it's not bad, I'm going to go out. And, and tomorrow morning and say the winds will still be high. And, it's still dangerous. And the ocean will stay rough for probably a pretty long time. And you don't want kids to go in and surf or people to run in to show that they're macho and run out. We gave summonses to 2 people for doing something like that. Yes, miss?
As for the people being evacuated near the crane
Right.
area, do you all know where they're being taken under the circumstances?
Well, the hotels, George Fertitta has been working with the hotel industry to find hotel rooms for all the guests to our city. The others are office buildings, and they just will have to figure out tomorrow or whenever we can secure the crane when they can get back in. So it's not like there's a lot of people outside of the hotel was the big group of people. There's no apartment buildings.
We have shelters available.
And we have shelters available, but is there anybody else living there?
There are a small number of residents are also in that area, but we got buses actually from the MTA to help shelter them, and then we'll work with the Red Cross and OEM to make sure that they have accommodations for now, and we'll help them out.
Last question, sir.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. What kind of outreach is being done to homeless populations to get them off the street?
We've, if you'd been to the other conferences, we talked about that a number of times. Our outreach teams are doing everything they can. It's a very dangerous time to be on the streets, whether you're homeless or you're just going from one place to another. And, hopefully we've gotten everybody that we possibly can. And there are some people that are just very difficult. They just don't they want to avoid interacting with others. And how you get to those has always been a challenge. And as far as I know, we're doing a good job with that. Last question, yes.
Can you give a little more detail on those surfing incidents? How many people have?
I don't know. There were 2 summonses, Ray. Do you remember what they were for?
What was the question?
The 2 summonses for the people in the water.
I think they refused to come out. It was disorderly conduct. I'm sorry?
There was just a couple of them?
We'll try and get
There was 2 of them at Coney Island.
Yeah. Bottom line is winds are going to get worse. Surge flooding is going to get worse. After 8, 10 o'clock tonight, it should start to get better, but it's still going to be very dangerous for a number of hours. By the time you wake up in the morning, the surge will have gone away. Not all the water drains out as fast as you might like it to, but you should see a lot of the water go away, and at that point, roads should be reopened. When the winds die down, we'll try to get the bridges open. The MTA, I don't know how quickly they can get things back in service, but they did a great job last time, and at least they aren't going to have any damaged equipment. There may be some rails or tunnels with a few problems, but I would think that certainly by the day after tomorrow, by Wednesday, mass transit would probably be back. But they're going to do it safely, and if they run into problems, I don't want anybody to say, oh, you said it was going to be. There's no guarantees. Con Ed will do their job, and if there's damage, it could take a little bit longer. But the most important thing, once again, is we're going to get through this and keep everybody safe. And my advice is stay indoors. Tomorrow, school's closed. Government workers, if you can get to work, we're here to serve the people. This is when they really need us. And for everybody else, if you had to take a day off, go ahead and relax. Thank you.